Welcome to lesson 112. Today we're going to learn how to reduce fractions. Now, in one of our last lessons, we learned how to make equivalent fractions. So remember that when we made equivalent fractions, we multiplied the top and the bottom of our fraction by the same number. So for example, to get from 1 to 8, we're going to multiply by 8. So we multiply the top and the bottom by 8. And our equivalent fraction is 8 over 32 is the same as 1/4. For this one, we're multiplying by 5 over 5, and we get 1/2 is the same as 5/10. Here, we're multiplying to get to 48 from 12. We'll multiply that by 12, or 48 from 4 is 12. So we will get 12 over 48. And then for this, to get from 8 to 64, we have to multiply that by 8. So we multiply the top by 8, and we get 56 over 64. These are all equivalent fractions, which means this fraction is the same as the fraction we started with because we multiplied by 1. So remember, whatever you do to the numerator, you must do to the denominator when finding equivalent fractions. So many times in math, instead of getting equivalent fractions that are bigger, we actually want equivalent fractions that are smaller because we want smaller numbers. Smaller numbers are easier to use. They're easier to multiply, they're easier to divide. So we're trying to find smaller numbers that are the same fraction, equivalent fractions. So what I'm going to do with 12 over 15 is I'm going to find an equivalent fraction that fits inside. So for example, 12 and 15 can both be divided by the number 3. So if I do 12 divided by 3, well, I know that's 4, and 15 divided by 3 is 5, which means that this equivalent fraction 4/5 is the same as 12 over 15, just using smaller numbers. And 4/5 is a much easier fraction to work with than 12 over 15 because they're smaller digits. So let's look at a few steps that we need to use to reduce fractions. First of all, the first thing we want to check is, does the top number fit into the bottom number? And what I mean by that is, does 3 fit into 12? It does. That means that to reduce this fraction, I simply divide by 3 over 3. So 3 divided by 3 is 1, and 12 divided by 3 is 4. So 1/4 is the same as 3/12. Now, if I check, does 9 fit into 12 perfectly? I see that it doesn't. 9 does not fit into 12 perfectly. 9 fits into 12 once with 3 left over. I can't do that with a fraction. So what I need to do is check all the smaller numbers. Does 8 fit into both of them? Does 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, etc. Now, for 9 and 12, I need to think, what number fits into both 9 and 12? Well, 8 does not fit into 9 perfectly. 7 doesn't, 6 doesn't, 5 doesn't, 4 doesn't, but 3 does. And I need to ask myself, does 3 fit into 9 and does 3 fit into 12? And the answer to that question is yes. So I'm going to do 9 divided by 3 is 3, and 12 divided by 3 is 4. So my new equivalent fraction that I reduced is 3/4 from 9/12. Now, here's a tip. Remember, any fraction where the top and bottom are even will always reduce because no matter what, you can always divide an even number by 2. There's not anything else that fits into 6 and 8 besides 2. But that's fine because they're both even, so we can divide by 2. Now, sometimes odd fractions just don't reduce. Just because it's odd doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to reduce, but a lot of odd fractions might not reduce. So if you're having a hard time reducing, check and see if there's an odd number in there because that might be the problem. Now, fractions like 9 over 27 reduce because I can divide by 9. 9 divided by 9 is 1, and 27 divided by 9 is 3. But for example, down here, 3 can be divided by 3, but 13 can't be divided by 3. Neither of them can be divided by 2 so there's nothing else to divide by. So let's try reducing these fractions. Let's practice. 6 over 18. Now remember, the first tip is check. Does the top fit into the bottom perfectly? Does 6 fit into 18 perfectly? Yes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide by 6 over 6. Because 6 divided by 6 is 1, and 18 divided by 6 is perfectly 3. So my reduced fraction is 1/3. 7 over 28. We ask ourselves, does 7 fit into 28 perfectly? Again, the answer is yes. 7 does fit into 28 perfectly, so we're going to divide by 7 over 7. 7 divided by 7 is 1. 28 divided by 7 is 4. Let's try a different one. 9/24. So we first ask, does 9 fit into 24 perfectly? And this time the answer is no. So we need to divide by something else. Let's try 8. Does 8 fit into 9 and 24 perfectly? Well, 8 fits into 24 3 times, but 8 does not fit into 9 perfectly, so that's not going to work. 7 doesn't fit into either one. 6 fits into 24, but not 9. 5 doesn't work. 4 fits into 24, but not 9. 3 fits into 9, and 3 fits into 24. So I'm going to divide by 3 over 3. 9 divided by 3 is 3, and 24 divided by 3 is 8. That means my reduced fraction from 9/24 is 3/8. Let's try 4 over 30. Well, remember, because they're both even, I know it's going to reduce. I'm just going to have to figure out by what. Now, I start by asking, does 4 fit into 30 perfectly? And the answer is no. So now I have to go down to 3. 3 fits into 30, but not 4. 2 fits into 4, and 2 fits into 30. Great, so I can divide by 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 30 divided by 2 is 15. So my new reduced fraction is 2/15. 5 over 35. They're both odd numbers, so let's see if they work. Does 5 fit into 35 perfectly? And the answer is yes. So this time I get to divide by the top number, which is 5, and 5 divided by 5 is 1, and 35 divided by 5 is 7. 8 over 28. Now, both of these are even numbers, so I know they're going to have to reduce. So let's start with 8. Does 8 fit into 28 perfectly? No. Does 7? 7 doesn't fit into 8, so that won't work. 6? Nope. 5? No. 4? Yes. 4 fits into 8, and 4 fits into 28. So I'm going to divide this fraction by 4. I'm going to do 4 over 4, and 8 divided by 4 is 2. And 28 divided by 4 is 7, so my new reduced fraction is 2/7. Let's try 7 over 24. So I already know it could be tricky because it's an odd number. So let's try, does 7 fit into 24 perfectly? And the answer is no. Does 6? Well, 6 fits into 24, but not 7. 5? Nope. 4 fits into 24, but not 7. 3 fits into 24, but again, not 7. 2 fits into 24, but definitely not 7. So I actually cannot reduce this fraction. So 7 over 24 is already reduced, and that's all I have to do. So remember, when you are trying to reduce fractions, first check if the top number fits into the bottom. If it does, just divide by the top and you're done. But if it doesn't, go down. Start at the number that you start with and then go down until you get to 2. If nothing fits into both of them, then you can't reduce the fraction, like we couldn't reduce this one. But if something else fits in, that's what you can divide by. And that is how you reduce fractions.